Hey everyone, I'm Sarah, and tonight we're going to be doing a drawing stream. Uh, we are actually going to do a floral study tonight of a Gerbera daisy, and I just want to show you the reference photo for tonight so that you have an idea in mind of what it is that we're going to be drawing. If you look right here, I've got my Discord link. There's also somewhere on the site, everything's changed with Twitch, but somewhere there should be a button. I think it's under About for Discord. And or you can actually type !Discord in the chat, and that will also give you the link. When you go to this site, I post all of my reference photos for whatever the drawing is, and also it's a place where you can upload your artwork and we can talk about it. So it's just a place to share your artwork. So let me take you real quick over to the reference photo so you can see. All right, so when you come to my server, you'll see there's a bunch of channels over here on the left. Reference photos is the channel you would want to go to. You click on the photo, and there you go. So this is what we're drawing tonight. One of the things I'm going to be focusing on is edges. So in art, you have lines and you have edges. So a line would be, let's see, that there aren't really a whole lot of lines in this one, which is why I chose it to study edges. But a line is when you have something, a mark, like a pencil mark, that goes around an object and it outlines the object that you're drawing. Whereas this, if you notice that there's shading around all of the places that would be a line, so like the outside. So instead of drawing a line here, you shade right up to it, and it creates two things happening. It makes this look white, first of all. It makes the flower look white, but then it also creates an edge or a border rather than a strict line. So that's what we're going to focus on today. I'm going to go ahead and put that down. So that's the reference photo. If you want to have that up while you're watching, then you can go to my Discord server and pull that up. Let's talk about supplies real quick before we get started. You notice that I've got a couple of things here. So I've got my drawing pad, and I've got a pencil set here. I particularly like this set because it's got sepia tones and it's got multiple types of pencils, including graphite, lead, and charcoal. However, you don't need anything this fancy. Number 2 pencil is fine for what we're doing tonight. Now, just a reminder, a number 2 pencil is HB. Like if you look at, let's see if that'll refocus. There we go. CHB. What that means is it is directly in the middle of the hard and the bold scales. So bold is mostly what I use when I draw. So I've got a 2B, 4B, and 6B pencil. B just means that the higher the number, the darker it gets, the bolder it gets. With H, the higher the number, the harder it gets, which means it's lighter and shinier and usually a much finer point. So H pencils are really good for things like drafting. Like if you were going to be drawing a blueprint or something like that, you have less smear, things like that. Whereas with these pencils, they smear very easily, which is good because we want to blend and shade and things like that. But yeah, so that is why I use the 2B, because these are more for drawing. Okay, however, like I said, number 2 is fine if that's what you have. You don't need fancy drawing paper. You can actually use just printer paper. It's fine. I also have extra erasers, because the eraser, as you can see, this one's been worn down. They get worn down really fast, and instead of going and buying one, because a lot of times the ones you buy will leave little eraser marks or things like that. Erasers on the top of pencils aren't usually very high quality, so I buy my own erasers. I also have a pencil sharpener and 2 tools you'll see me using from time to time that are from this kit that you can actually buy individually from like a Walmart or someplace like that, any craft store. Is this is called a blending stump. And all this is used for, it's tightly bound newsprint that you can blend by, you use it just like a pencil, and it blends whatever whatever you've drawn. This is called a kneaded eraser, and so you can actually, like, say I need to erase in a really tiny little corner, you can actually mold it to the shape that you want, and then erase just in that corner. So sometimes you'll see me use those. You can buy them individually, but they come in my kit, so you'll see me use them from the kit. All right, let's get started. So the drawing itself is in the horizontal position. So let's see. I've got some other drawings in here. This is called landscape orientation. Now, normally, something like a floral study would be done in a portrait orientation. So portrait is up and down, vertical, and landscape is side to side. Oh, when there's not anything there, I'm going to actually turn this light on. Come on. There we go. So you guys can see a little bit better. It does take away some of the warm color, but you can see better anyway. All right, now I use a 2B pencil because it's easier for you guys to see, but this is pretty much what we're going to use the entire time. We're not going to, so you can use your number 2 pencil, no problem. All right. So what I was saying is that floral studies usually are in portrait orientation, but which is the up and down. But today we're only doing the top part of the flower, which is basically a square. So we're going to be doing this in landscape, which is side to side. Okay. So first things first, we're going to find approximately where the middle is. Now, if you aren't sure, you can put your pencil in the middle and like just kind of hold it and then put it the other way. And see, so like right about here is the middle. And I'm just going to put a little tiny dot. You guys can't see that dot. So I'll make it bigger so you can see it. Okay. And that's just to kind of give us an idea of where to position our flower. So now remember, we're doing the daisy. So we are going to just very roughly and lightly make the shape of the daisy. So first I like to start off with like it's a little bit of an oval. And this does not matter if it's perfect or not. Like, see how sketchy I'm being? I'll hold that up so you can see. Like, see, my lines are very sketchy. They're not super clean or anything because these are our guidelines. They're not meant to be. At some point, let me see if I can get something dark in the picture. What it's doing is it's trying to constantly focus. All right, so I'm just getting the general shape of the flower. All right. General shape. Very light because, again, we're going to be erasing this. This is just a guide. So we're not too terribly worried about the detail. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in the basic shapes of my petals. So, like here, I have a petal that comes up and it's flat like across the top and then bulks out a little bit at the bottom. So let's see, I'll hold that up. So you can see it's like flat across the top and then it kind of bulks out here. And again, we're not doing any ton of detail. Let's just stick you there. And all of the petals are kind of like that, where they've got that flat across the top. All right. And I'm just following the general shape. So the next petal, if you're looking at the reference photo, the next petal is kind of skewed. And if you're just joining me on the stream, the reference photo can be found at my Discord server, which you can also find by, here, I'll just put it in the chat. There we go. So the reference photo is one of the channels on that server, is where I post all the reference photos. So all I'm doing is generally going around and following the reference photo. This is called contour drawing. So contour means that you are doing the outline, right? Which I know this sounds counterintuitive because I told you that we were doing edges instead of lines. These are lines, right? But we're going to make them into edges. Let's see, this petal is a little more rounded. They're starting to become more rounded as I go around. Then every once in a while, what I'll do is I will look and see on my reference drawing, I will see approximately where something is. So I'll measure and say, oh, this is the one that's facing directly to the right. And yep, that one's facing directly to the right. So you just kind of check yourself against the reference photo every once in a while. So this one's in the right place. Just to make sure everything's kosher, everything's in its place. Sometimes I'll compare the petals to each other too. So like this one, I noticed came out a little bit farther than the one before it, you know. So I just compared them to each other. That helps with shape too. Now, technically what I'm doing here is called modified contour. So modified contour means that I am, the alternative is blind contour. So blind contour, which would mean that I was only looking at what I'm drawing and not looking at the paper at all. Modified means that I'm looking back and forth between the flower and the paper. So that's just an art term that you might hear sometimes. Modified contour is how most things would be drawn. And this is what you want to get practice doing. Now, blind contour is pretty fun. It's actually a good exercise in looking at your object rather than your paper and not using your mind. Because a lot of times as artists, especially beginner artists, we have a tendency to use our memory of what something should look like. So we draw a face, or, you know, so in our mind, instead of drawing the shapes that we see in the person's face we're looking at, we draw what we think a nose and eyes and mouth should look like. So then of course it ends up not looking correct. It doesn't look like the person because you know, we're drawing from our memory rather than drawing what's actually there. You know, I am not embarrassed to say that I've got like kind of a weird thing going on with my face where the right side of my face is slightly lower than the left side. It's about 3 millimeters lower. Like everything is just shifted down. And so like if you were drawing me and you drew me where both sides were completely even, it wouldn't look quite like me, right? You know, it's not going to look exactly like me because my face isn't symmetrical. And a lot of faces aren't symmetrical. So it's important to actually draw what you're looking at. Now, so I'm ending this, when I drew this, I'm coming up a little bit short where this here should be off to the side a little bit more. So I'm going to actually just kind of change where it is, the location. And that happens sometimes, and that's okay. You know, it actually, I kind of started it wrong in the first place. So what I'm going to do is just exaggerate this petal just a little bit. All right, now I'm going to erase my guideline. Something key to remember when you are erasing, I always say blow, don't wipe. So you want to blow your eraser shavings or the little bits that come off the eraser. You want to blow those away. And the reason that's important is because especially as you start working with more, like your bolder pencils, like your, lead or charcoal, chalk, things like that, they smear so much easier, and you don't want to have all of your work ruined because you were wiping some eraser bits away. So always blow. Now you'll every once in a while, if I erase something on the very outside, like it's out here, and I can just get into it with like my little tiny pinky or something, then I'll wipe it sometimes. But I always try to blow. There we go. All right. So now we've got our general outline of our flower. And so you see that, yes, technically we can see the flower there, but it's not, if I just showed you this, you might not know what it was, right? You might not say, oh, that's a flower for sure, right? So, yeah, it's not supposed to look exact just yet. Now we are going to very loosely do our circle in the middle. And it's a bumpy circle. It's not a pure perfect circle. Might actually be a little bit bigger than that, but this is okay. And we don't even need to erase anything extra there. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start blocking in our the actual shape. So we're going to continue some of this down. So instead of just the contour now, we're going to actually start continuing our lines in. The reason we didn't do this in the beginning is because when you're doing this, if let's say everything got shifted off, remember how this was not in the right place, so we redrew it. Luckily we only had one like that. That's not always the case. Sometimes you have multiple that aren't in the right place, and if you did all of your lines and lined everything up perfectly, it's going to end up being a lot of extra work. So I do my contour first because that's just like a small bit of line that you have to erase. So notice that these taper as they get towards the middle. So it gets narrower. So this guy goes behind this one here. So we don't have to draw a line for that because it's going to be created by shadow. There's actually quite a lot of them like that. So this guy here is the one that's in front. So that's the one we see. Now, one of the hardest things to get when you're first starting out is proportions. So knowing like how big to make something and how far away things should be, that just takes practice. So, don't worry if your first flower, looks like wonky on one side or, maybe is like really, really small. I had one student who all of her drawings were all like about a quarter of the size of mine. Every single one. Her paintings and drawings were all about the quarter of the size. So I don't know. As she got better, like as she improved her skill, then that stopped becoming an issue. Like her stuff started to become normal size. So it really is just practice. A lot of people think that drawing, requires a lot of talent. That isn't true. Drawing is a skill. This is a skill that you pick up. I've been doing this for 30 plus years. But so for me, eyeballing things comes pretty easy. But it will for you too eventually. Now, when you have talent, and I'm putting that in big air quotes because I'm not really a fan of the word talent because I think it just gets misused a lot, when really skill should be the word used. It's not that talent doesn't exist. It does. Talent is your affinity and ability to pick something up more quickly. So if you have natural talent when it comes to drawing, then maybe it won't take you as long. Maybe you don't have to practice for 5 years to get good. Maybe you only have to do it for 6 months. And maybe after 6 months, you're like just nailing the shape of the flower or whatever. That's where talent is like your natural inclination to be able to do something. So some people are more talented in other areas. Like I know people that are very talented in language, and they just pick up languages really easily. I'm very jealous of that. I would like to be able to pick up languages easily. All right, so we've got all of our petals there. And some people are more inclined towards art. I have a little bit of it with art. I'm not like incredibly talented or anything. I mean, most of this is skill. But I was just able to maybe pick it up just a tiny bit faster, right? Get the concepts. A lot of it has to do with visual acuity. So like your ability to see things correctly, like see shapes and translate that to something like paper, So, okay. Now, what we're going to do for our guy in the center, we're just going to do a bunch of little tiny, all different sizes, little tiny circles. Now I'm going to hold this up so you can see them. So notice that some of them are very small, right? I've got some that are medium size, some that are bigger. And so you just want to do all different sizes. We're just filling that whole circle. You don't have to worry too much about being exact or anything like that because we're going to actually be filling it in to where you don't even see half of these. So you do not have to be precise. There does not have to be a pattern or anything like that. You can go over your line, like your outside line. That's not a problem. In fact, I encourage you to do so because then it's going to end up looking more natural where it's not confined to the middle. It's so funny when we try to be random, the human mind is not good at being random. So I'm looking at this and I'm seeing patterns where I wasn't intending to be, but my brain just naturally draws a pattern there. I think it's kind of fun to see how our brain works in practice. Now, something to be concerned about is where your hand is, because as my hand is over the places I've already drawn, I'm going to start to get pencil on the side and it can start to smear. So one thing you can do is you can put down a paper towel. Now, we haven't drawn too much and we're only using 2B, or if you're using a number 2 pencil, you know, it probably won't smear as much. But if you're noticing that there is some smearing, then you can put down a paper towel or another piece of paper or something like that. That won't smear. So like if I put, let's see, I've got paper towels here from my painting classes. So like if I fold this up and put this here, like while I'm working, I can do that as much as I want. It doesn't smear. So like that's a good way of just keeping your hand from making marks. It's a little bit like the glove that you wear when you're doing digital drawing, you know, that you can wear that glove that helps it from, you know, making marks where your hand is. It's a little like that. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start filling in our shadows. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start by putting shadows all around the inside of these little bubbles that we did. So I'm just going on the inside right now. I'm not filling in the outside bubbles yet, because some of those we are going to fill in. What's going to happen is you're going to notice, do not be careful about this. Like don't try to like very carefully you know, fill in the area, because what's going to happen is you're going to naturally accidentally go over some of the bubbles, and that is what we want. We want this to be kind of haphazard, you know, looking like there's both intention and yet flow, like you know, it was effortless, right? So in order to get that, it means you have to not care a little bit. You have to not try too hard to make your lines perfect. Don't try. That's what I'm getting at. Don't try. You don't have to try. Right? Just do. Sound like Yoda. Do or do not. There is no try. I don't know the exact quote, but it was something like that. So I'm just filling in all the areas, and like I said, I'm not paying attention. Like if I go over some of them, no big deal. No big deal. Some of them I might not even completely fill in. You know, it might be bigger in the area than I originally intended. That's okay too. Hopefully everybody's following along. There we go. So now, I'll hold it up. Now we've got all these places where we've got the circle. Now, like I said, I wasn't particularly careful, so I did accidentally, right? I mean, I wasn't really trying, but it was intentional to go over some of them. So I just, you know, let my pencil just kind of go, you know. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start to do some shading in the actual petals. All right. I'm going to keep this here because actually it feels nice, and I'm not worried about messing up my drawing. All right, so I'm going to start with this first petal that we did. So we've got some shadow on this left side here. And then we've got shadow in the middle. Now, I'm just generally shading in. We will use our spreader later, or if you don't have a spreader, you can use your finger, or you can use a balled up piece of paper, will work as well. Spreader is the best because you can get into corners. But you can use any of the things I mentioned. I did not have a spreader my entire first 2 years of my art career, and I did just fine with just using my finger. So, all right, now what I'm doing is I'm looking at the shape of the shadows, and they've got these long, like, kind of lines of shadow that come out, and what those are is that is where the petal folds in slightly, so the petal like goes in and out, and so that's giving the illusion that there is texture and depth to the petal. All right, so I'm not doing a whole ton of work, just generally filling that in. There's a little bit of shadow here. Let's see. There's some shadow at the top of the petal, so I'm trying to pay attention to that too. If you don't get that right now, you can always come back and get it later. Now, if at any point in time you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the chat. You know, I look over from time to time to see if there's any questions, so I'd rather help in real time than you wait until the very end when you had an issue that could be resolved towards the beginning. All right, now here we have a really nice edge. So you can press a little bit harder here because this is darker. And it goes all the way from the bottom to the top. And it's pretty thick. All right, then I'm going to lighten my pressure a little bit because the shadow on the outside of this, because this is this petal casting a shadow onto this petal, whereas this is the shadow of the petal going in and out. So this is a much lighter shadow, so I'm just not pressing as hard. So what we're looking at right now is called value. And value is how light or dark something is in a gradient. I'm not going to worry too much about the tops of the petals just yet. We'll come back to that. So this one has a pretty nice shadow too. This one goes all the way to the top. Okay. Now, what I do is I kind of gauge, like, so this goes about this far, right? How do I know how long to draw this particular shadow? So what I do is I look at the overall shape, and then I determine approximately, so like I know that this ends here, right? That I've got this little area here. Hello, Crixano. Welcome. Welcome to the stream. Glad you were able to make it today. So I know that this ends here, so I look in comparison to here, and it's about the same place. So that's how I know. I just look in comparison to other things around the drawing. And that's how you can tell, like, where to end your lines and things like that. It's just by comparing it to other areas. Now there's a couple other things you can do. You can look at the shape. So a lot of times I'll think in my head, what does this look like? This looks like, I'll look at negative shape. So like if you look at my arm real quick. So here I have a negative shape, right? That's being formed, this kind of triangle here. Okay, so I would look at this and I would draw that triangle rather than drawing my arm. And that's something that takes practice, but when you do that, then you start getting more precise proportions. Okay. When you get a song stuck in your head and you can't get it out? I've got Mamas and the Papas song in my head. Dream a Little Dream. I love that song. I'll do you guys a solid and not sing on stream, That's my good deed for the day. Not singing. I used to not be that bad, I used to actually sing professionally in a band. So, clearly I wasn't terrible, but I've lost a lot of it over the years. Everything happens with practice. This is what, if you practice something, you get better at it. That's just how it is. It's like, you might not be the best at it, so that there are some things that you just can't ever get, no matter how much you practice. But you're still going to get better than you were when you started. All right. So this one has like this weird shape at the end of it. And to me, it kind of looks like a pipe. Like you've got this long, like the old pipes that like you used to see, like kind of grandpa smoke or something like that. That's what that reminds me of. I said I wasn't going to sing. I didn't say I wasn't going to whistle. All right, so we've got another dark shadow here. So I'm just pressing down a little bit harder here. And this goes almost all the way up. And again, look at the shape that's created. So it's very narrow down at the bottom and then gradually gets a little bit bigger. And then right about here, it starts turning into an actual shadow on the petal. But it's not quite as dark in this area. So I'm going to be light first. You can always go darker, like you can always add. So I'm going light first, and then I'll decide how dark I want to go. All right, so I'm going to leave this pretty light. I'm going to go darker here, closer to the flower. So closer to the petal above it. That's where I'm going to go darker. All right. We're getting there, y'all. We are getting there. Now this has like kind of a weird shape too. It's like a very elongated triangle. Oh, and I almost forgot like this shadow here. There's like a very light shadow inside that petal. So this next one only has light shadows. It doesn't have any like really dark areas. All right, so at the top of this petal here, there are some interesting shapes that start to form. Like I see that there's a shape here. It's not connected to this shape here, so there's a separate shape there. So just pay attention to that and be aware that you've got different shapes going on. And then what those shapes do is then they kind of come down into the flower just slightly. All right, moving on. All right, it's kind of dark here, but then it lightens up just a little bit. It's not as dark right there. And I'm just constantly looking back and forth between my reference image and my paper. This is why it's really good to have that reference image up. It's particularly important. So I highly encourage you to join my Discord server and get those reference images if you're going to be following. Everyone is welcome to join. So if you're watching this from YouTube, you can join from there. You won't be able to access the link, but you can see it here, so you can type it in. Or you can go to my Twitch page. Or you can look in the description, because I try to put the link in the description. All right, so we've got some interesting stuff going on here. And I'm using this opportunity. I noticed that this petal came over a little farther than I wanted it to. I wanted it to go in just a little bit more. So I'm using this opportunity to reshape it a little bit with my shadow. And you can do that because you're the artist. You can do whatever you want to your drawing. You know, and I was going to tell you something. I noticed, so the other day, I'm on a subreddit called Learn to Draw. And someone had posted a picture of a girl, and I actually responded to it because the person who posted it, the artist, was very concerned about shading in the hair, or just the hair in general. I think they felt like it didn't look the way they wanted it to look. And something I want to share with you guys that I also shared with that artist is that the way the hair was drawn was very kind of light and airy, and it didn't have a lot of detail in it. Like the outline of it was really detailed, but then the inside of it didn't have very much shadow and things like that. But it actually looked good the way that it was, and you don't have to be realistic. That I think that's something that a lot of artists, when they first begin, like kind of lose sight of, is that, you know, you're going to find your own voice in your art and your own style. And maybe realism isn't your style. Like it might be, like I had one student who was a phenomenal painter. He was 7 years old, and he, you know, a brilliant painter. But all of his stuff was very choppy and kind of impressionistic. And man, I mean, it just looked amazing. This 7-year-old, you know, blew me away. But his stuff, it didn't look purely realistic. You could tell what it was, for sure. You know, he definitely was very talented. And he had a lot of raw talent, which means that, you know, he could just pick it up and start trying it, you know. He didn't necessarily need the lesson to do it. But I'm telling you, like, there is value in just finding your own style and it not having to be realism. You know, some people do better with abstraction and their minds work better with abstraction, and that's okay. In fact, if anything, I'm a little jealous if you can do that because it's not something I'm particularly good at. I do the realism all right, but you know, to me, the abstraction takes more than skill. You know, that's where like talent kind of does come into play. All right, so here notice that there's these stripes that go up and these stripes that come down, but they don't exactly meet. That's because that's creating our highlight there. And we'll clean up these lines a little bit. Like we'll clean with an eraser, we'll come in and we'll kind of dot the lines so that it looks more natural. All right, so so now we're on the left side of the petal. It's still actually the same side of the petal, but it's because we've moved down. So again, just looking for shapes. So I see like kind of two triangles here that then turn into these longer shapes. And it's raining here. I love the sound of rain. It's like one of my favorite sounds. Okay, now here, this one here is almost entirely in shadow. So we're gonna, it's a little bit darker on this side. Conceivably, there's like another petal down here that you can't really see. And that's the idea of why we're doing that dark. But what this does is by putting this whole thing in shadow, it pushes this entire petal back, right? It pushes it back behind the flower and it makes it look like it's, you know, it's underneath these two petals. So, you know, shadow really does more than just create depth. I mean, this is depth, but it's creating 3D space, right? Now I'm getting a little bit darker because this was lighter than I intended. Now, like I said, you know, you don't have to shade in dark at first because you can always go darker. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm going darker. The only problem with the sound of rain is that it puts me to sleep. It makes me want to sleep. So that's not great. Not if you're live streaming anyway. It maybe is great if it's right at bedtime. My bedtime's pretty late. So right. So we're getting there. Look, we're filling in our flower as we go around, and it's a little bit at a time, but we are getting there. You know, it just takes patience. This is my favorite thing about drawing, though. It's very meditative. You know, I had a mindfulness stream that I was doing. It wasn't as successful as I would have liked, so I have temporarily halted that. But mindfulness is really important, like just to be really into what you're doing. Like really, really, it's in the moment. There's so much benefit to it. I can't even tell you all of the benefits, but you know, it's really good for your health. It's really good for immunity to stress. You can actually build up an immunity to stress to where it's not that the stressors aren't going to happen, but you handle it better and your body handles it better. You know, your body doesn't start to panic when it gets stressed out when you practice mindfulness and meditation. So it is definitely worth doing. I highly recommend it. And you can just look up mindful meditation. There are all kinds of free meditations on the interwebs. All right. Now I'm going to put I can see that I'm starting to get just a little bit of pencil there, so I'm going to put this back on. To protect both my drawing and my hand. I'm not worried about getting the pencil on my hand. I mean, pencil washes off. It's just more I don't want it to smudge everything. So, like when I'm drawing this, I'm looking at the negative shape. Remember I showed you with my arm, the negative shape that's happening here, that triangle? I'm also looking at the negative shape between each stripe. So that tells me how far apart the stripes, you know, should be from each other. You know, I look at the stripe in the picture, and like, so I notice that this negative shape gets a little bigger here and then gets smaller again. So it's like, it's got a tiny little peak there. You're just looking for things like that. Now, of course, your negative shapes are going to be based on your original outlines that we did. And so if your original outlines are a little bit disproportionate, then your negative shapes might be disproportionate. But sometimes this is an area where you can actually improve your drawing as you're going. Like remember how over here this petal like came out to like here, and I said no, that's not where I wanted it. So I used the shadow to kind of mold that. That's what you can do. You can actually use your shadows or like, you know, when you're doing these negative shapes, you can use them to kind of reshape your drawing into the let's see, where was I think I was looking at the wrong petal. That happens. It happens, you look at the wrong petal, you know. All right, this little guy down here is very dark in that center area. The rain is getting really hard. Hopefully it is not drowning me out. I can't tell. I think my mic should take out a lot of the background noise, but if it doesn't, I apologize. And you guys, wait until we actually do the background. Man, once we add in our background, then it really pops, because that background creates the edge all the way around the flower. Let's see. Crixano says, I'm not following along because I'm dealing with too much emotionally right now. Okay, no problem. Not to say that this works for everyone, but sometimes drawing actually works to help me with emotions. Like when I draw, like I said about the mindfulness, that's that it kind of helps put things in perspective when you're mindful. So it helps you think about things in a different way. And that is where that's another place where it's really helpful, is it can help you kind of manage your emotions. This has been a very emotional week for me too. I had a kitten in the family has passed away. That was very sad for me. I was one of the first people to bond with her a lot because I was staying with them at the time when they got her, and so I was home during the day, and so she's only a year old. That was pretty sad for me. That just happened yesterday morning. So I mean, I get it. I do. This has been a rough week. I think a lot has happened this week. I mean, I don't know what's happened for you, but a friend of mine also has had some stuff happen with her. So it's just, I don't know. Maybe there's something in the air. What I love is when people say things like, "Oh, Mercury's in retrograde." It's not real, y'all. Astrology is not real. All right. Oh. I just saw a little light flash over to my left, and it's because there's like lightning or something must have flashed, and it reflected off my phone, which is over on that side of my desk. So it just startled me. Oh, I hear the thunder. Thunder's a nice sound too, but definitely not when you're trying to get things done. It's definitely better for when you want to go to sleep. Thunder, come back when it's my bedtime. It never listens, but I still talk to it sometimes. Okay. We're getting close, y'all. Just 2 more. Now, you could always turn. You could turn your drawing. I'm not going to, because I mean we only have 2. We only have 2 more. It's not too bad. Now remember our edges. I'm showing you my air quotes. The edges. Remember that to make sure that your shadow comes up along the lines that we drew before, and that's what's going to create that edge. There is a little bit of technique to creating an edge because you want what you're shading to be the same level of darkness as what you drew. That's why we do really light lines when we're sketching it in, because we want the shading, the shadow, to be the same or darker than what we drew there before. That way you don't see that line. It just ends up blending. So here I've got this kind of dark shadow on the top of the previous petal. That's like a very long, narrow triangle. And then I've got this one that just comes right up almost through the middle. It starts off thin at the bottom and then gets thicker at the top. Now this petal, it changes direction. So this is going here, and then all of a sudden it turns and goes down a little bit here. And that's because the petal is curved. And that's what you're telling the viewer, is to recognize that the petal is curved. Okay. So we're done with that part. Now, we are going to, let's see. I think I want to actually get out my eraser. So you can use the eraser on the back of your pencil or whatever. But here's what I'm going to actually come in to different places and just take out some bigger chunks of areas. So I'm going to hold this up so you can see what I'm doing. So see, I had just come and just take out some bigger chunks. Now, if you have a kneaded eraser, you can actually do this with a kneaded eraser. You just make a little point. And it's the same thing. All right. Now, I want to, let's see. Here, we're going to just dab. All you do is you're literally just kind of just dabbing the eraser. You know, so like when you push and then there's like a slight little pull up, like a pull away, right? And you're just doing it at the edge of some of these lines. And that just cleans things up a little bit. Or really, it doesn't even clean it up. It really makes it more choppy. Now, we're getting ready to use our blending stump. If you have one, that's great. If you don't, then you can use, like I said, you can use your finger, or you can use a balled up piece of paper or paper towel. The thinner the paper, the better. So like newsprint actually works better. So this is actually made out of newsprint. So we're going to come in here and we're going to blend like right up into the corner. Now, if you're using your finger, then you would just blend like that, right? And see, I already got some. All this does is kind of smooth out our lines so they don't look. It also can give us like a little bit of like a haze around the lines. And so it looks a little bit more like a natural gradient. Just makes it look a little smoother, more realistic, more organic. Telling you guys, I might have to go to sleep right after this stream with all this rain. It is very intoxicating. Now because I erased out some areas, then I can let my blending stump come like a little bit out. And what that does is it creates that kind of soft gradient that indicates that this is a highlight, that there's actually something under it, that this continues under this, but because it's highlighted, we can't see it. And that's what you want. Now I press a little bit harder in these darker areas. And that just blends it a little bit more. So I'm just varying my pressure with my blending stump, and like the lighter you go, the less it's going to blend. And as I'm going around, I'm remembering all the techniques that I did when I made these in the first place. And again, just lighten your pressure as you get towards the outside of your lines. And that will help give you that kind of natural gradient. All right. Now we're getting into some of those dark shadows that we had before. Welcome if you're just joining the stream. You can see my Discord link there. You can go get the reference photo. There is a channel on my Discord called Reference Photos, and that is the only thing that is on that channel. So you can pull reference photos for any of the lessons that I teach. Including today's. I always put it up the day of. Okay, now that we have our dirty stump. Now, if you don't, you can actually take your pencil. In these areas here, we actually have this little tiny area of dark. Let's see, there's one here. Where the petal curves. There's only a couple places where it does this. So if you were using a blending stump, you didn't even need to do what I just did with the pencil. If you're not, though, you do, because you won't have anything to draw, but like you won't have anything to blend. But the blending stump gets dirty, and so you can actually use the dirty spreader. I just think that's a hilarious term. Dirty spreader. So just those little corners there makes it look a lot more realistic. You know what? I messed up. This one was not supposed to have the corner. The corner was supposed to be here. I was on the wrong flower. On the wrong petal, rather. Not the wrong flower. We're all on the same flower. It would be very bad if I was on the wrong flower at this point. Alright, so I'm making this area darker, and then it gradually blends out. Okay. Let's see. So here we've got a very dark line. It's like a little bit coming down from the top. Now this particular reference drawing has these like little, they look like bubbles, but I think it's supposed to be pollen coming out of the middle of the flower. I'm not going to be drawing those. I'm using my artistic license to ignore those. Artistic license is when you decide what it is that you want to draw. Like if there is, say you're outside and like you're in a park and there's a garbage can that's right next to, you know, the tree that you're drawing, whatever. Then you can choose to not draw that garbage can. Like you do not have to. You can imagine what's behind it, or you can draw everything but what's behind it, and then go, you know, investigate and see. But either way, you don't have to. You do not have to draw it. That is your prerogative as an artist. So it's called artistic license. Now, I don't know what happened to the top of this particular flower. I'm just going to remove it right now because we're going to be coming in with our edging later, and it'll take care of that. Okay. We're just working our way around. So all those shadows that we just did, we're just blending all of them now. Again, just a reminder, if you have any questions about the artwork, please feel free to post in chat. Of course, you do not have to ask, but if it's going to help you figure out what you're doing or where you're going, then I would like to help. You know, sometimes we find ourselves stuck on one little thing, and just asking someone for help sometimes makes the journey so much easier than if we had just stressed about it. Sometimes there's value in looking and figuring things out for yourself, though. I do agree with that. But I can see both. It just depends, especially if you're struggling and it's something that, like, it's just preventing you from moving on. Okay. Let's see. I think I started right here, so I'm almost there. I am run us there. right. I think we're good. Okay, now we're going to do the center. So all of these areas that, like the large areas that I kind of erased out of, I'm just going around them with my, just with my spreader. All right, then I'm just kind of filling in. Just using the spreader just to fill in. All right. Now, we do have a stem. So very lightly over here, it's kind of coming out of this flower. I'm just going to very lightly draw just the outside of the stem. Now, this is the fun part. So we're going to be doing, now you can do hashing. So hashing is where you go, like you do some lines like this, and then you cross and do some lines like this. So you technically it's hashing just to do it one way. But it's cross hatching. Hashing is when you're just doing the lines. Cross hatching, H-A-T-C-H, is when you cross. So you can do that. I'm just going to use my pencil, and I'm just going to come in here and just shade. Now, you want to try to shade generally in one direction, but of course, that doesn't always work. So what I do is I go like this, and then I'll come over and I'll shade like this. Just go the opposite direction. Now you want to go right up to your lines. We're just shading in, that's it. Now when you get to your lines, just be extra careful to not color in them, not to go inside your lines, but just right up to them. And I'm just going different directions. You can go sideways if you want. You know, whatever. Whatever works for you. And I'm going to go the opposite direction. And you can go off your page. I'm getting marks on my hand. I can feel it. That's the thing. When you do this long enough, you can start to feel like the pencil on you. Now this, you can go ahead and definitely turn your drawing. Since you did a psychology minor, I believe, I was wondering more about autism. I don't know a whole lot about it. Don't people with autism have low empathy or something? Sometimes, but not always. I think, I'll be honest with you, I don't know a ton about it. I know that there's like a social component to it, or rather lack of a social component. I know that sometimes like people with, and I would say it's now autism spectrum disorder is what it's called, ASD, because it's been discovered that it's not like a finite thing that you have. Like you have this one thing. It's actually on a spectrum. So like some people have more mild cases and some people have more severe cases. You know, you've got like, I don't know if anybody's ever seen the movie Rain Man. Really, really good movie. Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise. And I'm not a big fan of Tom Cruise. I think he's kind of a jerk in almost all of his movies. And I think that he's so good at playing them because maybe he kind of is in real life, is what it seems. But I don't know. I don't know him personally. So it's possible that he's not, that he's a really great guy. But what, you know. Anyway, I'm fixing this petal, by the way. This petal, I went a little too crazy with the edge. So I'm just coming in and just fixing that. Here we go. What I know about it is that a lot of times people with ASD have trouble with social cues. Let's see, I'm trying to think what else. There tends to be like kind of a fixation sometimes on certain things, like you know, and it's different for everybody. Like sometimes it's objects. Sometimes you know, somebody with ASD might fixate on objects. Some might fixate on you know, correctness of things, like, you know, being like words having to be correct, or you know, dress having to be correct, you know, things like that. I don't know. It's just different. I honestly, I don't know enough about it. And so I apologize that I'm not really giving you a very good answer to that. If anything, I studied it less in psychology and more in education, but I did not go into special education, which is what I would have had to you know, to work more with people with ASD. So so I just don't know enough about it, but that's where I learned more about it, honestly, because the teaching style is a little bit different. I just hit my elbow on my mirror here behind me, and it didn't feel great. It's actually hurting pretty bad right now. So there's that. All right. I'm still trying to like go all different directions. Now at some point I might have to sharpen my pencil. But luckily, I have a pencil sharpener. Do you know if autism has a genetic component, as in can it be passed down? Or rather, if a family member has it, would it make it more like, you know, I don't know. And the thing about it is I think that there's still a lot about autism that people, that, you know, we just don't know. It looks like there is definitely a case for, okay, so I think it might be one of those things where maybe you have like a marker for it or something, but you may or may not develop it depending on things that happen in your childhood, you know, because you can have like environmental uh, components that would like affect whether you get it or not. This is similar with like schizophrenia, for example. You know, not everybody who has the genetic disposition for schizophrenia actually develops schizophrenia. So, like, it can be developed, it can actually go away. So, yeah, so, you know, I don't think autism goes away, as far as I know. But they just don't know. I don't think anybody really knows what causes it per se. But I think there may be some genetic component to it in that maybe some people are more susceptible than others. But I don't know if it's a direct correlation of like, well, somebody else in your family has it, so you might get it too. I just don't know. We don't know. It's one of those things that is relatively, I mean, it's more research now, but it's one of those head scratchers where we don't fully know what causes it, why it happens, you know, what like you said, genetic factors go into it. It's just an unknown. And it's difficult to diagnose too, because it has, you know, it's comorbid sometimes with other things. And it has a lot of similar traits to other things too. So comorbid, by the way, if any of you out there don't know what that means, it means that it exists at the same time as some other diagnosis. Okay. Try not to get too crazy out here. All right, I'm going to turn this. But see how it's starting to make that flower pop? Yeah, this is my favorite thing. I really like edges. And what's cool is that when you start layering the pencil over each other, then you really get like a lot of different lights and darks. And it just looks really interesting. I'm holding my pencil at a slight angle. Let's see. I'd say it's actually about a 45-degree angle, so that's not even really slight at that point. You don't have to, but I found that way I can shade more. Now here, hold on. What did I have going on here? Let's look at this. This was this was the one that like curved around. Okay. Because I knew I didn't have a petal that big. So this is one of those things where we're using the shadow to shape our flowers. This one comes down too, so I'm gonna go ahead and get this one. So it comes up. There we go. All right, I try to be pretty careful when I come down into the flower area because, you know, you don't want to mess up the petal shapes that you already have there. But I still try to keep generally the same direction as whatever way I'm going at the time with the pencil. I try to stay in the same general direction. It gives it a more coherent look. All right, let's see. This one. Now, by me going all different directions like this, it creates this effect of making it look like a drawing, but at the same time, it gives it some interest because it creates a texture on the outside of the flower because you expect your texture to all be in the flower. But by creating this on the outside, it actually generates visual interest. Visual interest, you'll hear me talk about that a lot in my classes. That is basically the art of composition. You know, creating a composition, which is the overall appearance of the image. That is actually probably a bigger part of art than the actual item or subject matter that you're drawing. One more question. I heard someone call autism a mind blindness in the sense that they have trouble thinking about what other people think, know, whatever. They call it theory of mind. I was wondering how accurate that was. Yeah, so theory of mind is actually a big part of that from what I understand. Now, okay, so this is actually one of the ways that they diagnose autism when kids are little. So most kids develop theory of mind when they are about 3 or 4 years old, like somewhere in that age range. And there's different ways to test that, and I'll tell you about those in just a second. But the point is that kids with ASD usually don't develop it. They can develop it eventually, maybe not fully, but like it might not be till like 8 years old or something like that. So that usually indicates that autism is present. That is one way of diagnosing, is that theory of mind. So, all right. So here's a test of theory of mind that they do with kids. All right. You get a box that says Band-Aids on the outside. Now inside the box, you place coins. Okay? That's not what you expect. When you look at the box, you expect to get Band-Aids, right? But you open it, you get coins. All right, so you hand this box to a 3-year-old who's never seen it before. And the 3-year-old, well, let's go even younger. Let's say 2.5, we want to make sure they have not developed theory of mind yet. So at 2.5 years old, a kid would look at that. They'd open it up, see the coins, and say, "Oh, look, there's coins instead of Band-Aids." Then you give them a scenario where another kid comes in, the Band-Aid box is back closed again, so you can't see the coins or anything. You say, another kid looks at this. What do they think is in the box? The first kid is going to say coins. They're not conceiving of the fact that they were surprised at first. They thought there was Band-Aids there. But now that they know that there's coins in there, they think everybody else is thinking that same thing. That is the theory of mind. So now, once they get to like 3 or 4, they start understanding deception. And they start understanding things like what other people are thinking. And so things like at 4 years old, a child usually could say, oh, they're going to think it's Band-Aids. Like, that's the first thing they're going to think. So, but they cannot do that before. So that is something that is not always present with autism. So yeah, kids with autism, or ASD, I should say, definitely there is like a trouble understanding that somebody else is viewing this in a different way than you are. So let's say, let's say you have a phrase that's been stated. In your mind, that phrase means this, like the connotations behind it, whatever, mean, like in your mind, it means this negative thing or whatever. If you had good theory of mind, you would be able to think, well, not everybody probably thinks that, right? Like most people, maybe, or not even most people, but some people are going to look at this and see it in a positive way, right? Or maybe they don't see what I see at all. Like maybe they take it a completely different way, right? Somebody who has poor theory of mind would not be able to do that. They're going to assume that everybody views this thing the way they view it. So that's like a more relevant example for like an adult. Because the kids in the Band-Aid box, like at some point you develop a sense of, even if you don't fully understand it, like I said, kids around like 7 or 8 years old maybe will start to see like, oh, everybody else thinks that it's a Band-Aid. So I'm going to say that I think that they think it's a Band-Aid. Like you start developing, like you understand patterns better. So it's not that you fully understand what it is you're saying or why you're saying it. You just know that that's the answer that's expected. So anyway, okay, let's take a look at this. So there's some places in here. I'm going to turn this off because I want you guys to be able to see like the dark and the light. So we've outlined this. And I'm like loving it. Look at how much drama that added, by bringing that in. I'm going to crisp this up right over here. It's this area here. I'm looking for any other places that need to be like crisped up, where I just come in and, this guy here for sure. Let's see. I think this one, I'm going to actually shape this a little bit. Okay, I think this is pretty good. Now, there are some areas that are darker. So like this here, this is a little bit darker. So I'm just coming in with my pencil and just working this a little bit more, and I'll spread this. Okay. This is darker here. Like that line that goes up. This is darker here. Let's see. Now, not just not. This is where the empathy comes in with the ASD. Is that if you don't think that other people are thinking their own thoughts, then it might be hard to have empathy and to like put yourself in their shoes. However, I don't think that it totally negates it, because you've got situations where like you might actually know what they're going through, right? So you might have actually been in a similar situation, and so you know what that feels like, and so you can say, hey, I know what that feels like, and actually know what that feels like. So I think that it doesn't preclude all empathy. Like I think that there's definitely a case where somebody, especially with someone with a mild ASD, which is I believe that it would be kind of like Asperger's as an example. I think of that. So if somebody has like kind of a mild case, they may be able to do a lot more than in that respect, like with empathy and stuff like that, than someone who has a more severe case. Looking, okay, I've got some dark here. It's very interesting. I mean, if you're interested in it, I would go just read more about it. A lot of times what I do is I will go to like Wikipedia or something, and then I look down at the references. So like when I get to a section that's really interesting that I want to know more about, I look at the primary sources down at the bottom, and then go from there. And then I start reading primary sources, because you don't want to rely on like, Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is not like necessarily a great resource, but a lot of times the resources down at the bottom, the references, are good resources. So, all right, I'm going to put a little bit more shadow in some of these areas in here. All I'm doing right now, I'm just adding some more shadow, but it's creating drama. Because this is it's a black and white photo, right? So because we don't have any color, we need to get our drama some other way. All right, I'm not going to fill all this in. I'm just on the right side. I think I heard there was an anger or outburst component too. Also, not liking being touched. Yeah, I mean, these are, so what you're saying is that there's these are like kind of generalizations, and so I don't know if those happen to all people. I don't know if that's like common symptom or not. It might be, I don't know. So that's where more research I think would be helpful, or just talking to someone who's like a professional in that area. So like educators in that area, counselors who are trained in that area. And it is important, because not all counselors are going to be able to handle that. It's people that are specifically trained for that. So, but yeah, I that is components. Like I said, I just don't know if it's across the board, or if it's, kind of one-off here or there, depending. I think some of it also depends too on how you're raised, because how you develop your behavioral skills, like, so how you develop your skills, like coping and things like that, is going to affect how you react, right? So some kids that have ASD, especially with a milder case of ASD, if their parents work with them a lot and there's a lot of repetition and things like that, then they may be pretty well adjusted and don't have as many outbursts or things like that, or they can control it more. So it really just depends. Environment plays a big part of of um, of how things manifest themselves, I think. Okay, I'm done. I am going. Oh no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I forgot to blend. I'm going to blend just this guy right here. I'm not going to even worry about the other areas that I did dark. It was just that one. You know, I didn't want it to look too choppy. Let's see. Let's see. I do want to come across the bottom here. There we go. Okay. Oh, well, thank you very much, Crixano. I appreciate it. So this is the thing. So we started off with just a general, you know, oval, and then we started just kind of working in our shapes from there. And that's how you, I'm going to actually work in this shape here. I want this stem to look more like it was going that way. So, all right, I'm going to sign this and then we're going to talk about it. Now, if you put your stuff on my on ArtShare on the Discord server, I can give you feedback if you want. I can give you feedback and tell you things that you can work on in your drawing. Otherwise, you know, you can just share something and just say, you know, no feedback necessary. I just want to share what I did. I'll probably still give you some emojis because I love emojis, but you know. We like to do feedback because being able to talk about your artwork, being able to talk about yourself, and being able to give yourself constructive feedback is really important, both positive and, I hate to use the term negative because it's not negative. If it helps you grow in some way, it's not negative. And really, there's not even positive either. It is just feedback. But we have a tendency to attach labels to things, and so positive and negative sometimes go with that. So what I would say is that I like to say one thing that's really effective about my drawing. Like, I figure out what was the overall agenda of this drawing. Like, what was I going for? And then what is most effective in that vein? Like, what is really working in this drawing? And then what could I work on to make it more the kind of theme that I was going with. All right, so let's look at this. So I wanted this to be a relatively realistic looking daisy, Gerbera daisy. I already see a place where I can fix it. I was already working on it here, but right here, this one is standing out way more than these other ones on the side, and I don't want that. I want these to blend just a little bit more. So whether the picture has this or not, I really don't care. This is artistic license. So on either side of this, I'm going to put some darkness down here kind of at the bottom, and then I'm going to take my blending stump. Oop, wrong side. And I'm going to blend. And the reason I'm doing this is because otherwise this one looks like it's just sticking out a lot. Like it's just really, I don't know. It did not look right. So so there I did that, and it kind of blends everything in. All right. So first things first. So I wanted this to look realistic. I do think that my edges turned out great. The edges are the part where yes, I drew lines, but then I brought my shading right up to those lines. So then all you see is the outline. All you see is the rather than the lines. You don't see those lines anymore. The key to that, remember, is drawing your lines very light so that your shading is always the same or darker than the lines, and then that is how it's going to look like it blends. if I had to work on something, like the shadows, I think are the most effective part. Um, this middle part here, I think I could work on a lot more. I think there's in the reference photo. Let me just bring up the reference photo again so you guys can see. So here's the reference photo. So see, in the reference photo, you can actually see that this part right here is darker and it makes this petal stick out. But you know what? I don't like that. So that's why I went ahead and just took artistic license and added my own shading. But see here, you've got all these like little white spots. But look at mine. So mine, I don't have as many white spots up there. So, you know, I could fix that right now. I could take my eraser and just very carefully come in here in some areas and just bring out some white spots. And that's one way to do it. Another way would be to, you know, erase everything and just redraw the center, not the whole thing. We're not redrawing the entire flower. This is where a kneaded eraser is great because you can really get in and do detail erasing. Other than that, though, I think this is a success. It looks pretty close to the reference photo. The only part that really is kind of wonky is this area right here. This petal here actually comes up a little more this way. So it ends up being closer to the same height approximately. I'm not going to fix that. And the reason is because it would be very difficult to erase out of this. If I wanted to fix that, back towards the beginning would have been the better time to do that before I started adding all this shading. Now I'm stuck with it the way it is, but you know what? It still looks like a Gerbera daisy, right? It doesn't, this just basically it just makes it look different than the reference photo. Let me turn this back on. Nope, I'm not either because you can't see the shadows. This light isn't great. I'm gonna have to work on my lighting. But anyway, hello, Musahu. That's a cool name. And welcome to the stream. So we are actually finishing up. So anyway, this is it. This is the drawing. And, you know, like I said, this still looks like a daisy. So it's not like, it's not like because I messed that area up, it doesn't look anymore. So it doesn't matter. So that would be one of those things where I don't need that as feedback because it isn't, Mosa. Okay. So I don't need to fix this or do anything with it because it's not taking away from the fact that I wanted this to look like a real daisy, and it looks like a real daisy. One thing I will say is that the stem would probably connect to this. And so you see how it's going a little wonky? Let me see if we can fix that. I don't know if we can. Let's try. So we're just going to have the stem go slightly different direction. And that was because it was looking like the stem was going to about here. But of course, that's not what it would look like on a flower, right? It would turn and go this way a little bit. So that was successful. Luckily, I was able to erase in that area, and it didn't affect it too much. But I think that looks a lot better now. Looks more realistic. So that's it. That is all there is. So we are actually I'm doing an acrylic painting tomorrow, and we are doing Gerbera daisies also tomorrow, but a painting version. So we'll talk about how you would paint them, because it's going to be very different than what we did today in our drawing. So thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow in my acrylic painting stream, which will be at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And If I don't see you tomorrow, have a fantastic weekend.